Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. Happy Saturday night. I'm Stephanie Edmonds. This is Teaching Liberty. And as we do on Saturday nights, we're going to be going through some of the big headlines of the week and maybe the not so big headlines that you missed. Going to be asking those hard questions. We're going to be, digging past the headlines and seeing if we can't get a little bit closer to the truth, which seems to be missing from a lot of places these days. So, in search of the truth, in search of liberty, let's begin this official Teaching Liberty live. I was going to have a guest. I had one canceled. I tried to get a backup guest. I thought we were good. It didn't quite work out. So it's just me, myself, and this beautiful face right here with you guys. So I appreciate you checking in. Make sure that you hit that like button, share this stream with a friend, tell them to come hang out. We're going to be here for a while. We're going through that House subcommittee on the government's coronavirus response, which you may or may not have heard about. Of course, we've got the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, which is really just a proxy war for the United States and some other nations. Is it leading to World War III? We're going to be talking after that, a couple heavy topics. We're going to get a little comic relief from Scott Adams, which you may or may not know who he is, but he says some funny things and he likes to hear himself talk. So we'll laugh at him. And then we're going to talk about Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. He was just at CPAC, so we'll listen to a little bit of what he had to say, talk about what we think may or may not be going on with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. And then if we have some time, we're going to talk about the whales, because there's some dead whales that are turning up on the East Coast. I guess it's kind of an unusual amount, and there's some climate change activism versus old school conservationists. It's really weird, actually, right? Because you have the people who are out there caring about the whales, and then you're like, no, we need the wind farms because we need to change over to green energy. So it's this interesting clash of like the old left and the new left, maybe, or like the new right. I don't know how we're defining those, but we'll get into that. So make sure you hit the like, make sure you tell a friend to come check out this stream. And I guess without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first story of tonight that I wanted to talk about, which is this subcommittee. So if you didn't know, there's the House, which is Republican controlled, is having a committee to review the government's coronavirus response. And so we're getting to learn a little bit more about the truth, and we're getting some alternative opinions, because we've had this illusion of consensus that's finally starting to be broken. We're getting into like that common knowledge phase. So let's start off with this one right here. It's a little clip on Instagram. Gives you some good stuff. Make it a little bigger over here. I wonder if we can restart it.
Everything going on, you probably missed experts testifying in front of the select subcommittee of COVID-19, and this is what it looked like.
The greatest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic has been the United States government. Misinformation that COVID was spread through surface transmission, that immunity was far greater than natural immunity, that masks were effective, that myocarditis was more common after the infection than the vaccine. Not true. It's 4 to 28 times more common after the vaccine. Our two top experts on vaccines quit the FDA in protest over this particular issue, pushing boosters in young, healthy people. The data was never there. That's why the CDC never disclosed hospitalization rates among boosted Americans under age 50. And we've seen something which is unforgivable, and that is the weaponization of medical research itself. the CDC putting out their own shoddy studies, like their own study on natural immunity, looking at one state for 2 months, when they had data for years on all 50 states? Why did they only report that one sliver of data? Why did they salami slice the giant database? Because it gave them the result they wanted. Same with masking study. Well, the data has now...
You see why they didn't let this guy speak? You see why they didn't let him speak? Laying down the facts. This guy's name is Martin Macri. He is, I believe he's still at Harvard, or at least he was. But let's let him finish.
Caught up in giant systematic reviews, and the public health officials were intellectually dishonest. They lied to the American people.
With everything going,
they lied to the American people, and he just listed at least a dozen different ways in which they did that. So let's read just a little bit more about, I guess, what went down, where this came from. So we have this article right here from Newsweek. A little bigger. So no brainer, COVID was made in a lab, Johns Hopkins doctor says. So maybe he's from Johns Hopkins. Maybe I was wrong. So it says a professor of public health policy at Johns Hopkins University has told Congress that it was a no-brainer the COVID-19 originated from a Chinese laboratory. The same day, the director FBI made a far more cautious assertion of the same effect. So, oh yeah, it does say Marty Macri was from Johns Hopkins. I don't know why I was thinking Harvard. One of those prestigious universities who they pretended wasn't there throughout this whole thing. But yeah, it was interesting that the FBI on the same day, they were like, oh, I guess we should come out and say that it came from the lab now that it's becoming kind of obvious. Speaking on the panel to the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic on Tuesday, Marty Macri, a surgeon who became a prominent pundit during the pandemic, has no background in virology, noted a series of indicators that made it clear to him that the virus came from a lab, but said it was embarrassing since the U.S. government had funded the lab. And that really is the smoking gun, I would say. Not for it coming from the lab necessarily. There's other evidence to prove that, but smoking gun of why this really snowballed into what it became. Fauci knew we funded those labs. Not only did we fund them, but it was here, right? There was research going on in the United States. And then during the Obama years, I believe, it was like made illegal. So then they sent it over to China, and then they did some weird funding scheme through this third party, like nonprofit or non-governmental organization. And we're doing the same research in China. They knew it was going on. They were funding it. And that's basically what the article kind of goes on to say. They give more specific evidence. Matter of fact, let me show that, because I think it's really important. One thing I don't like when people make claims and they don't show the evidence. That happens so much on social media. So I'll just go through this here because I think it's really important. Anthony Fauci, the former chief medical advisor to the president, previously came under fire after it emerged the National Institute of Health gave US-based Eco Health Alliance, so this was that non-governmental organization I was talking about, a $3.7 million grant in 2014, which would have been under Obama, as I said, 600,000 of which was sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in order to study bat coronaviruses. So, right, everything I had just said, they confirm right here with the specific names and dollar amounts. Somebody's asking, like, if do I have this on my Instagram? I don't have this specific story on my Instagram. It's really hard to keep up with this stuff during the week, which is kind of why I do this live show, so that I can get 3 or 4 news stories from the weekend and give my analysis. Just because, like, during the week, I'm doing so much video editing and just like local issues. It's really hard to like keep up and make those quick videos on Instagram. but I can try to talk about it a little bit more. If there's something specific, let me know. Let's see. However, he denied the funding had been used to develop so Fauci basically said, okay, we did the funding, but it wasn't used to do like that gain of function research. And Peter Kasak, I think that's how you say his name, a virologist and president of EcoHealth Alliance, told CNN in April 2020 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology did not have the virus that caused the pandemic. So apparently he's certain about that. But I definitely, if you want to look more deeply into somebody or something, Peter Kasak and EcoHealth Alliance, he's not a name that you hear like Anthony Fauci or even Francis Collins or some of these other government officials, Rochelle Walensky, who's the head of the CDC. So definitely look into this guy. The prevailing opinion among intelligence analysts and scientists remains that COVID-19 spread into human populations by jumping the species barrier from livestock into a wet market that had been infected by a contagious bat. So apparently Newsweek is still claiming that people believe this, even though the FBI came out and said it wasn't. So it's kind of confusing. And then they're saying that this study in 2022 concluded that it was from the Wuhan wet market. Or I'm sorry, the seafood wholesale market. Want to make sure I'm not calling things by the wrong name. So yeah, basically that's what's going on here. I guess I'll play one more clip from this that I thought was really good. I mean, I could honestly, I love Marty. I could watch him all day. The way he speaks, he's so exact. I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately because it's a tactic that I see people use where they're so nice, right? They're so kind. They're such a good person. And I'm not nice. But those nice people, those kind people, are they really getting the job done? Are they really doing what they say they're going to do? Whatever the thing is, perhaps running a school district. And I would say no. Whereas maybe I'm not always so nice or so kind, but I authentically care and stand on the truth. And that's what I see Marty doing. Is he saying things nicely? Is he worried about making his words so that he doesn't offend anybody? No, he's speaking the truth, and that's what more people need to do. And that's actually really connected, I think, later on to the James O'Keefe story that we'll get into. But let's go ahead and watch the last thing I wanted to about this committee meeting, the hearing. Figure here. So this is Marty Macri on Twitter. Make sure you go follow him. He's a good follow. And he was hanging out there sitting right next to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who we're not watching any clips from in this video, but who I've had the honor of interviewing at Stanford. I'm actually going to be following him around next time he's in DC at the end of this month. So that's going to be really exciting. But yeah, definitely another name that you want to check out, Bhattacharya and Martin Koldorf. He's another really good one. He actually lives here in Connecticut. So this is a question. This right here is, I think, a congressman or I think so. I believe he is an elected official, and he's asking a question to Martin.
CDC, yet we continue to see the CDC putting, for example, the COVID vaccine on the schedule for kids, which when you look at programs for Head Start and where it's highly pushed to have these vaccines to be able to participate in some of these other programs.
So this is a really good question, right? And because we've seen this a lot where they really put the pressure on the parents, like, oh, if you're going to school or if you're playing the sport, you should take the shot. So I really like this question.
Could also be another effect there, secondary effect to that. Could you speak to that and then your take on CDC requiring this for kids?
The CDC and the FDA and people at the NIH made up their mind before the trials were completed. They decided babies were going to get vaccines before the study was done. And when it came out, it found no statistically significant difference in efficacy.
Exactly right. It was all political. They decided before, and they say it during the thing. They're like, yeah, not really a lot of efficacy. There's doctors that bring up points, but they're like, we have to do this because parents want it. Oh, and this, by the way, here's Jay Bhattacharya, the other one who I was talking about.
Between the two groups, and they just authorized it anyway. Why are we even doing trials? Why do we even have an FDA? Why not just have King Fauci decree that everyone's going to need this? And public health excluded anyone who had a different opinion. Ask any one of us that had different opinions than the establishment if we were invited ever to the Public Health Association or university forums. We had published collectively 400 articles on COVID, including peer review articles in JAMA, and yet we were excluded. So of course it looks like there's a consensus.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. The illusion of consensus. And in our interview, Jay talks about this a lot. The illusion of consensus. So Maria's asking where can she find this whole video? So you can just search on YouTube House Subcommittee. So I'll put it in the chat. House Subcommittee Coronavirus Response. And the whole video should come up, I do believe. If you can't find it, send me a message on Instagram and I'll definitely send it to you. And also, I just want to give a shout out to DJ Elf. He's saying, props to my boy Dion, who was my co-host last week, and that we're out here, we're still fighting this. We're making sure that they don't get to rewrite history, because I think in many ways that's what they're trying to do. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but somebody did tell me that some of the Democrats on this subcommittee were asking pretty biased questions and questioning these three gentlemen and whoever else was here, their qualifications, and of course, more of the usual stuff. But definitely go check that out. You can check out it's the House Subcommittee Coronavirus Response Hearings. And like I said, if you have a question, leave a comment or send me a message on Instagram, and I'll definitely make sure I get you that link. But the next story that I wanted to get into here tonight, the other kind of big ongoing story, something that we covered last week, is Ukraine. It's been, I think it's just over a year. I think it's like 13 months now, right? Because it started last January or February. And so we're going on a year, and it seems now, there were reports just the other day that Ukraine is running out of ammunition, and also that it seems like Russia is really like gaining some ground and using more firepower than perhaps they had been using in the past. So I wanted to play some clips from Kim Iverson. She's on YouTube. I'll just bring up the video right now and I'll talk a little bit about it before we get into it.
I spent 15 years of my career trying to.
There's an advertisement playing real quick. Skip past that. And basically, Kim Iverson, I'm gonna bring up her video. She's a great follow on really all social media platforms, but definitely here on YouTube. So this is her right here. And has been really good about COVID from the beginning. But I like her foreign policy. I think that she does really great foreign policy. She comes with different experts than you're going to see on the major channels. Not that she doesn't ever have some of the same people on. She's going to come with different takes. She's going to bring information that is outside of sort of these culture wars and these political games that you're just not going to hear. And that's what she does here, I believe, with the Ukrainian story. She's definitely going to bring you what you're not going to hear on those mainstream channels that are basically just warmongering right? They're just out here warmongering, more war. We need to support more weapons. We need to send more money. And don't get me wrong, I do not condone Russia invading a sovereign nation. And I feel really horrible for the people of Ukraine who are enduring just like horrible war torn conditions, uprooting their life. It's unimaginable. And I'm, but I also think that there's a lot more there than just, oh, Russia decided to invade Ukraine because they felt like it. There's a lot more there. And somebody like Kim, she really brings that analysis. And so I had picked out a couple clips here. I want to play. So the first thing I want to do is I want to play this press conference that was held by, I believe this guy is Swedish. And they're talking about how Ukraine is going to join NATO, and that's why we really need to make sure that we're helping them. So let's go ahead and listen to this part of it. Oh, wait.
Have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance.
So he said, we have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance, the alliance being NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, which was started during the Cold War to counter the Soviet Union, the USSR. And it's a treaty that has remained in place to this day as a defensive alliance. And it also is kind of like, if you're in NATO, you're like a real European. You're kind of like a high class European. And these more Eastern European countries, which used to be the Soviet Union, they're kind of caught in between, right? Because it's supposed to be a buffer. And Russia has always said, like, if these countries start to join NATO, that we're gonna have some issues. But anyways, let's listen to this clip.
With Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin when the comments were made. Here's the clip.
So both NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance, but at the same time, that is a long-term perspective. What is the issue now is to ensure that Ukraine prevail as a sovereign independent nation.
Right. So he's saying long term, right? Long term, they're going to join NATO. That's the plan. But right now, we need to make sure that they actually exist, that they don't lose to Russia.
And that therefore we need to support Ukraine.
I see that the future.
Now we're gonna hear from this lady, and she's gonna tell us exactly what we need to do to make sure that Ukraine is still in existence.
Of Ukraine is to be part of European Union and also member of NATO. We have taken many steps forward when it comes to military aid to Ukraine, and I'm very glad that we are now cooperating together much more closely to give Ukraine more heavy weapons. I think the discussion now, even though it's have taken some time, it's been very important concerning, for example, the Leopards. So countries are cooperating together more closely and more widely. And this is a very good thing. We have to support Ukraine.
War is a good thing. So you can see that just super warmongery here, calling for more war. And so Kim, she's going to bring in, well, let's just let her introduce her. So her guest, so I don't do it wrong.
Marine Corps Intelligence Officer and former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter. Scott, welcome to the show.
So here, let's hear that again. I want to make sure that we understand who this guy is.
We are willing to continue this as long as it takes.
You hear that? She just committed. We're willing to do, easy for her to say. We're willing to do this as long as it takes. Not me. We're going to send your boys to go do this as long as it takes.
Give them more heavy weapons as she's looking sideways at the United States, right? It's easy for her to commit those. With us now is former U.S. Marine Corps Intelligence Officer and former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter. Scott, welcome to the show.
All right, so former U.S. Marine, former U.S. Intelligence Officer. I think we always have to be suspicious and skeptical of people like this. What are their connections still to the intelligence community? Who are they talking to? What is their MO? Is it just to be an expert and kind of get paid for their expertise knowledge, or are they still out here kind of playing the game? But I do find his perspective to be credible in the way that he puts it, again, especially when I'm comparing to what I'm hearing on the more mainstream sources, and whether it's from the left or the right? Whether it's your like MSNBC types or your Fox News types, because they're all warmongering they're all kind of saying the same thing. Slightly different reasonings, but they're all down for Ukraine. So let's hear what this guy has to say.
Thanks for having me.
These guys just don't know when to quit. We are on the brink of World War III. We know that NATO's expansion has been largely to blame for the current climate that we're in.
So that's exactly what I was saying. NATO's expansion. As NATO continues to take more and more of these countries that get closer and closer to Russia, Russia's like, what are you guys doing? If you keep trying to take more of these countries that are on our border into NATO, we're gonna retaliate, right? That's tit for tat.
And yet here they are. Here's the Secretary General of NATO saying,
right, this is a map showing this was 1988. So you can see all this area here. Let me see if I can make it bigger. No, I can't. Okay, anyways, this whole area on the left side, 1988, the red was Europe. And now look how close they are up against Russia. And that does not make Russia too happy.
Ukraine will be a part of NATO. I mean, what in the world is going on? Are they really trying to march us into World War III?
Well, I mean, the problem with the Secretary General is he can't backtrack from the years of history dating back to 2008 when the initial invitation was sent out to Ukraine. Indeed, one of the reasons why we're at war now is that NATO refused to acknowledge that it could in fact say no to Ukraine. Instead, NATO manufactured this open door policy, which doesn't exist. There's no article in the NATO charter that calls for an open door. It says that anybody who wants to join NATO must be considered by the complete alliance, which must evaluate the application based upon their national and collective security arrangements. To invite Ukraine into NATO at this juncture is to invite NATO into a world war with Russia. This is absurd in the extreme. But the good news is NATO will never be a member of NATO. I hate to break that news to Jan Stoltenberg and the Finnish.
He says
Prime
NATO will never be a member of NATO, but he means Ukraine. He means Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. And I do think that's accurate. Now, I do want to bring this in right here. DJ Elf is saying Scott Ritter, who's the gentleman who Kim is having on as her guest. I mean, I generally think Kim does a good job bringing people in, but DJ Elf here is claiming that he was busted for sexual communication with two self-identified teens, 15 and 16. He admitted to the activity, and now he's being elevated to deflect from the sexual transgressions of Nick Brana and Caleb Maupin for the Jimmy Dore Network. I don't know. I don't know about this. I'll definitely have to look into this. I can neither confirm nor deny any of this, but I like Jimmy Dore too. I think he does good work as well, good reporting. I like his analysis. Like, I think he sniffs things out pretty well. Though his solutions, I'm not always so keen on his solutions. He's like super left. So even though he's like, the government does this bad and the government is corrupt and the government's that, I think the solution is more government. So it's a little interesting, but let's keep going with this one here. Let me see what I do. I have a little list of the times that I wanted to do. All right. So next thing that I wanted to skip ahead was to 7 minutes. And Kim's basically asking him, like, where do you see this going? Is this really gonna lead to a World War III? Like, what's Russia's goal here? And so I think he has a pretty good answer to this. Again, I'd love any other takes or background information, whether you're in here in the chat right now live or listening back. Let us know in the comments. Do you trust this Scott Ritter character? What do you think of his analysis? Am I not asking some of the questions I should be asking? But again, let's listen to this next section.
Russia is going to have this decisive win. I know that they're in the last stages in Bakhmut, that is looking like that is going to fall into Russian hands pretty quickly here. I mean, where do you see this going further? Are we talking all of Ukraine? Are we talking just the eastern side of Ukraine? What do you think that looks like?
You know, I fall back on my old friend and mentor, Ray McGovern, who is a old CIA hand, and he was a Soviet analysis back in the day. And he always said that the best way to figure out what your Soviet / Russian leadership is going to do is to listen to them, and they'll tell you. And Putin just gave a speech on February 21st to the Federal Assembly, and he told us what's going to happen.
Right, and this is stuff that you could basically never know. We would never know that Putin gave a speech to his General Assembly and to read the whole thing. Like, we barely even know what's going on in here. And so, again, I think that this is great information. I mean, I didn't personally go and corroborate it and look up the speech and read the speech. I'm taking him at his word that this is what he said. But he basically goes through and he says that Putin wants a certain amount of Ukraine plus an extended buffer area. So we'll let him talk a little bit longer about that.
Said that Russia is going to secure the economic and social future of Novorossiya, that is Kherson, Zaporizhia, and the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk. The totality of these territories will be Russia because they are Russia. So that tells you right off the bat that this war doesn't end until Russia reclaims all of what it deems to be Russian territory. And then he said that.
And really, anybody who I ask when I talk about like Russia versus Ukraine, they will all say that that kind of part of Ukraine is really like more Russian. That's why a lot of people, if they came over before the Soviet fell, they'll say they're from Russia because when they were there, that was Russia.
The Russians won't stop until they push the Ukrainians back past the range of the longest range system provided by NATO. This is the HIMARS equipped with the small bomb missile, 150 kilometers. So we now know the limit of the Russian advance. So it will be 150 kilometers away from the borders of Novorossiya and the Donbass. And this means the city of Kharkov, Odessa are now fair game. And I have to tell you that if Russia takes Odessa, or should I say when Russia takes Odessa, they're not going to stop until they achieve the land bridge with Transnistria, which is that breakaway area of Moldova that is sitting like a thorn in the side of NATO, Moldova, and Ukraine. So
I guess my question would be like, if somebody wants this guy to come out here and be saying these things, what would be the point of it? I guess it's like, oh my God, Russia's going to do these things. Russia's that strong. I guess the point would be like, if we don't want Russia to do these things, then we need to fight even harder to push Russia back. But that's not really the conclusion that Kim comes to. She's like, well, they're going to win anyways. So what are we doing? Why are we wasting these ammo and all of our money, right, on these things? So let's go up to the next section. And she's basically like, all right, well, does Ukraine have a chance? Right? This is what Russia wants. This war's been going on for a year. I mean, I do recall in the beginning, people are like, oh, Russia's going to come in and they're going to sweep them. And then it was like this big deal after the first month that Ukraine had held them off and pushed them back and reconquered some cities. So perhaps Ukraine still has a chance, right? I mean, it's been already over a year. Let's see what Scott Ritter, our maybe questionable commentator here, has to say.
That the Zelensky regime will not survive this conflict. So Vladimir Putin has told us exactly what victory looks like.
Do you think, though, I mean, this has taken them, it's been a year, and I think many analysis was that that this would be very quick, that they would be, that this goal would be, many of us believe this. I thought this too. I thought that they would just go in and within a month they would have reached their objective, but it's been a year. It hasn't been as easy as they thought. Is there a possibility that Ukraine pushes back? I mean, we've seen some offenses that Ukraine has been able to actually enact and successfully so. And if there is a possibility that they do receive these heavy weapons that Santa Marin's talking about, maybe they do end up getting F-16s or whatever else it might be, is there a possibility that Ukraine is able to push back? I mean, we're seeing some chatter, from the Ukrainian side that they're going to go after Crimea. There's always this sort of posturing, but what are the chances that actually happens, do you think?
I think the chances of Ukraine taking Crimea are about on par with the chances of a snowball surviving in hell or me climbing Mount Everest, zero. Um, the fact is, even though this war's gone on for a year, it's not been a homogeneous conflict. It's been in phases.
I think this is really important. He's about to go through a timeline here, right? It's been in phases. And there has been, I think, at least 2 instances where we could have had a peace deal, and the US has blown up those peace deals. But let's let him go through the timeline.
I too was one of the analysts that said that if Russia engaged militarily with Ukraine and in war, that this war would be over quick. And I'm 100% convinced that I would have been right. But Russia fooled everybody by not going to war. They carried out a special military operation, and we now know what was their goal. Their goal was to drive Ukraine to the negotiating table for a rapid conclusion to this conflict. And they almost succeeded. If you recall, there were 3 negotiations in Gomel in Belarus in early March, and it led to what should have been a final negotiation where a peace treaty was signed in Istanbul on April 1st. But it was NATO that pulled the plug on that, leading to the second phase, which was Russia's attempt to use military forces to reconquer or to liberate, according to their terminology, the Donbass, Donetsk, and Lugansk. But they did so using the original complement of forces. Russia never mobilized for this. And this opened the door for Ukraine to reconstitute a defeated army because their military had been largely defeated by the Russians by June of last year. They received tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment, and they were able to launch a successful counterattack against an overextended Russian military that had insufficient forces to carry out the tasks assigned. And they were able to get some good results, the recapturing of Kharkov, the right bank of Kherson. But that's it. They burned out their reinforcements. They have nothing left. Russia, meanwhile, mobilized 300,000 reservists. They brought in an additional 180,000 volunteers. They've assembled a force that is close to 700,000 now, well-equipped, well-trained, well-rested.
All right, so you basically get his argument here. He's saying this is it. Russia's finally bringing their full force out, and that was never their aim in the beginning. They wanted to do enough to get them to the negotiating table, negotiate a significant victory in their view, push back the NATO encroachment and not have to, spend money, lives, more resources, all that type of thing on war. Didn't work out that way. So now he's saying Russia's going to bring their full offensive and very quickly overwhelm Russia. Russia will very quickly overwhelm Ukraine. So we'll see if that does happen. I do want to play one last little clip from here. And it's actually like me playing a clip of her playing a clip, because it's the clip where, and you might have heard about this or seen it, Zelensky basically says, give us more money or else you're going to have to send your sons and your daughters to come fight this war. And it's almost laughable, to be honest, but let's go ahead and watch this clip.
Exactly the same way as
back it up. Hold on.
Americans, this is what Zelensky had to say.
The U.S. will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight. because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying. God forbid, because it's a horrible thing.
So that's what Zelensky said. If you missed it, now you know. And I mean, it's a scary idea. Again, this whole use of NATO to kind of bully us into giving them more support, but it's also just a completely ridiculous idea. I don't think that there is any way, aside, and they have this conversation a little bit about how, maybe a very minimal amount of special forces or something, but no substantial boots on the ground. He said it's ridiculous to think that we could use our Air Force in any significant way over there without just getting completely shot down in the ground because of the massive amount of airspace Russia controls. Yeah, so again, I think a lot of this is posturing. Um there's no winners here, right? There's no winners. We've wasted 40, 50, who knows how many billions of American taxpayer dollars, all while we have more and more of our own citizens homeless out on the streets struggling. I know my 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 budget is getting tighter around here. Gas prices are creeping back up. Food is getting much more expensive. Energy prices, right? My bill to heat this house has gone up. My taxes and insurance have gone up. So there's no winners here, right? Russia goes in and shocks and alls and takes over Ukraine. Okay, maybe the war ends and, the end, I would love the end of the war, but that sounds like a huge expense, right? Is that maybe there's a chance for peace before that happens? Maybe NATO will, figure out how to use this storyline to save some face and I don't negotiate. I don't know. It just seems like there's no winners. If you know, definitely let me know in the comments down below.
So he's saying,
Because I don't know how this ends, but I think we need some comic relief, and I don't know how comical this is necessarily. I mean, sure, everything is comical when you're viewing the end of the world, but seeing kind of more people catch on to what's going on here, it's can at least be a little bit of satisfaction, right? So we got Scott Adams here. May or may not be familiar with him. Show you his profile real quick. He changed his whole profile to say this whole thing, and he doesn't even have his picture in here anymore. This is him right here. Scott Adams. Bald, kind of like old white guy. And you can support him on his locals. And here's the tweet. So he said, "Turns out I'm only politically canceled. White Democrats who saw the out of context news canceled me completely, as they do, right? Which is why it's like I try, but they won't have me. So you have to go with the people you have." Okay, so white Democrats who canceled him. Black Americans, they were like, all right, let's talk about this. And conservatives never blinked or canceled me anywhere. Conservatives are just like, yeah, Scott, we're glad you caught on. White Democrats are a hate group. One comment that I did think was funny was this one right. No. I think I'm not in the tweet. No, I am. I have to show more replies. Oh, there was like a really funny thing. Oh, yeah. He's like, I'll get it. I'll find it. But if you're wondering like about this whole Scott Adams thing and what he said, like where is this coming from? I guess I should back up and just like really quickly play that video. So this is what Scott Adams had originally said that people were talking about. So that's right here.
Nearly half of all blacks.
So he's reading from some survey, right? There was some survey, and he's like, based on this survey.
So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away.
First of all, who pays this guy for his commentary? I'm sorry, but like, if you pay Scott Adams, come to my channel and pay me. Like, my commentary is at least as good as his, but I would argue better. Like, he's just dumb. I found the thing that I wanted to show you before too, that somebody left in the comments that explains a lot, I would say.
But I'm also this. One of the things I've realized about myself, I like attention. I just kind of like it. But I'm also kind of an energy monster. This,
So basically, he just says things to get attention. All right. So if you listen to this guy, can somebody go over to Scott Adams' page and say, "You dumb people pay for Scott Adams. Go waste your money on Teaching Liberty." I think you'll get more value. So that's my little comic relief section of the show. If you ever just think the world can't get any dumber, I guess go listen to Scott Adams. But although I don't know, he's starting to get things now, right? Because he gets it. And that's what I tweeted. I was like, I'll pull up my tweet, I guess. It's right here. I said, so it's taking some time, but more people are starting to catch on what's really happening. So maybe he's catching on. Maybe this is a good thing for the people that pay to be in his locals community, that he's understanding how it goes, right? Conservatives, not that they don't ever cancel and cry about things, right? I'm not going to defend them that far. But in general, right, I've had this experience as well, right? I don't like, these labels. I like liberty, right? I don't see myself as a Democrat. I don't see myself as a Republican, though I've been registered as both not both at the same time. At various times, I've been one or the other for a political end. I've tried on different labels: conservative, progressive. But I just like when the government doesn't use a lot of coercion. Like, I don't want the government to tell me what to do. I want it to be small and do very limited, constitutionally based things. And I used to be able to get along with Democrats and Republicans alike. They used to hate me equally. But now it's like the Democrats will be like, you're racist, you're an extremist, you're this, you're that, so it's like, I go over to the conservatives and they don't agree with me on everything. They think I'm a little weird, like with my nose ring and, my gauges in my ear. Sometimes they're a little suspicious. They're like, about this girl. But they accept me. We have conversations. We find a lot of agreement in places. So it's like, that's who I hang out with by default, because the other groups won't have me. So, Scott seems he's catching on. He's catching on. And hey, hopefully things are moving in the other direction, right? Hopefully I think this is a good point. DJ Alf is there's good people. Yeah, like when you're really out on the streets with, regular Americans, for the most part, I would say people can get along. However, I do find that when I say things, it's usually a Democrat who's first to get offended at something I have to say. But I do agree. Good Democrats, good Republicans, There's good people on both sides, as somebody once was accused of saying. Though I totally am not saying what he said and don't want to be associated with he who shall not be named. What do we got next? What do we got next? Oh, Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. So I wanted to cover this a little bit more last week on the live show. I didn't, but I did put out a video. If you haven't seen my video, you should venture over to my YouTube channel. Well, you're already there, so, but there is a video that I did, and I'll show it to you. Prove to you I did it right here. This Project Veritas, what's going on? And so I think that this video is different. Like, even if you know the information about James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, and if you've seen their latest or that big explosive Pfizer video, I think that the way that I do my video, it brings value to the conversation just about like what is directed evolution and how has that practice been used in pharmaceutical industry in other ways for a long time, and just bringing some context and understanding to that Pfizer video that everybody was like, oh, look, they're doing gain of function research and this and that. So trying to break through some of that sensation, have the real conversation, which is what I want to do with this James O'Keefe stuff and Project Veritas. So I still think that there's a lot of like shock value to it. Like, James was fired by his board and now he's going his own way. And it's shocking and it's huge and it's big. It's sensational. It is all those things. But at the same time, I do feel like we have to kind of take it from that level down a little bit so that we can have a reasonable conversation about these in like that very much are sensational, not just sensationalized to be sensationalized, but like it's legitimately sensational, but we still have to bring it down to have that conversation. And so I think the first thing is this real? Like, is the James O'Keefe split from Project Veritas and the whole board thing, is it real? I think that's a legitimate question that not enough people have asked, and they just kind of sort of assume that they're like, oh, yeah, of course, James' board kicked him out because he was investigating Pfizer. Pfizer tried to take over the board. And maybe, I actually do think that it's true. I think that it's a little bit like all those board members would basically have to be sacrificing their reputations to have kicked James off. And I don't really see what James gains from being deceitful in this manner, right? Of course, they have to be a bit deceitful to get the interviews, but why would he want to deceive his audience? Because he's become famous by being very truthful, by exposing the truth. So I think this is legit. I don't know if it was Pfizer that infiltrated his board necessarily, or it was just the people who don't like the kind of reporting that he's doing and how he's doing it and the people and places he's targeting. Because I feel like if you're going to take over the board, you need a decent amount of time to do that. But anyways, he was at CPAC. Let's listen to what he had to say at CPAC. And of course, James always comes to, he always puts on a show. I went to a James O'Keefe event, live James O'Keefe event, and he's a thespian. Like, he is, I think he said he was in theater in high school. And when I was there, he performed a song for us. He sang a song. I forget what the song is. It was a good song though. It like went along with the theme of the night, and it was hilarious. Like, he is a great performer. So he puts on a show as always, and he did at CPAC, though it wasn't singing and dancing. It was just bringing a big announcement as he always does. So let me bring this up. I need a what do they call those? Producer to help me bring things up. I'm over here kind of going back and forth doing things on my own. Anybody wants to help me produce Teaching Liberty, let me know. Leave a comment down below. Send me a DM over on Instagram. or Twitter, whatever you prefer. Teaching Liberty, find me. So right here, we've got James O'Keefe. This is over on his Twitter. So you can see he's at CPAC. He says, and his big announcement is Debbie Bernal. She was somebody who worked at Pfizer, and she helped expose Tristan Walker, who was the person who we saw on the date talking about the directed evolution and all these kind of plans that Pfizer had for their COVID vaccine. She helped expose him. It seems like she helps just confirm who he is, that he actually does work for the company, and that what he is saying is legit. So let's go ahead and just hear from him what he has to say. And you can see in the background over here, it looks like he just got finished playing the Pfizer video, and then he's kind of talking about, okay, how we did this, how we made this video. This is how we do this type of reporting.
But I've learned a lot of things over the last month. Having been ousted from the company I founded 13 years ago, mere days after the story. And as this was happening, I was talking to one of these people. And she was a little reluctant to go public, rightfully so. She was scared. It didn't feel right. But after what I went through, we reconnected. The individual who helped identify this man, who helped bring this to light, who was targeted, who was brought into a room, interrogated, who had a red van go to her home, harass her and her loved ones, who was scared for her life, was so inspired by the series of events that have occurred over the last 3 weeks that she's decided to go public with me on this stage right now. Debbie from Pfizer, would you please come out here?
I was worried that I would end up in a body bag or in a car accident. But I realized that the spirit of fear is not from the Lord. As a believer, I knew that I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't just sit there and watch people get lied to.
For me, that's it. To live in fear is not in the spirit of the Lord. And that is why it is so beautiful to be a believer in the one, in the only, in the King, our Lord, God, Yahweh, however it is that you refer, is because there is nothing to fear. Right? The only thing to fear is I only fear God. So anything that man tries to do to put me in a state of fear, I have the armor of God on to protect me. And that is what is so, that's what the truth is about. So I did want to cover one more story about the whales. Maybe I'll do that over on my Instagram later this week. It's an interesting one, I think, about conservationists, people who care about the whales, and then people who care about the environment and going green, kind of going head to head here. But yeah, I think that that's a good way to end. This is a spiritual warfare, right? We have to have our boots on the ground. We have to do that work. We have to stand up to the people that are here representing those other forces. But at the end of the day, this is a spiritual warfare, and we cannot win without a deep faith in a one and only creator. Because that's the only God judges. The judgments of man, the actions of man, they mean so little in the overall scheme of things. And I believe that as we restore God to the center, because, right, the Constitution is really just a document saying that It's the natural rights that come from God that the government protects. And here are some of those specifics. But it all goes back to God. So we need God to become back. We need God back at the center of this country. And as we restore God to the center of what we do as a country and what we each do as a individual and what we bring into the families that we put together and the children that we raise, that's how we really restore this nation. When we don't have fear of big corporations and when we don't have fear of faceless bureaucracies and when we really have love for our neighbors and when we really have that faith in God, I believe that's how we win. You got to have the boots on the ground, the action to do it, but no, it doesn't mean anything if you don't really believe in God. Or however it is that you express that faith in that higher power. I don't like to get all God on people, godly, or get it, because sometimes I feel like it can turn people off, but I really do believe that. I really, really do believe that. We need to restore God to the center of what we do. And when you do that, when you know that God is always looking down upon you and you have to answer to that, makes you think twice about some of these things you do. Some of these nice people that come out here acting all nice and kind and want to accuse you of speaking unkindly or saying mean things when you're just speaking the God-given truth. I will always stand on that truth, and I hope that you stand on that truth, and I hope that you keep that beautiful face living free. And I think that's all we got for tonight, folks. So make sure you've hit that like button. I appreciate everybody who hung out with me. Leave definitely, if you're watching this on the playback, leave comments. I want to know what you're thinking. And I'll be back here next Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully I'll have a guest host with me. If you want to be that guest host, again, let me know in those comments down below. I appreciate you. Stay free.